Hello guys, David Vose here. Oh buddy, it's a beautiful day here in paradise. And it's especially great because we have an especially amazing, great video for you. I do believe, and I'm hoping that this video will go completely viral and follow the coattails of the video we just did yesterday, because it seems like the only thing anybody wants to hear is something in the news or the election or Trump or something. So we did one yesterday, and today we're going to do one that's important and that matters, and I hope that you'll watch it, and I hope that you'll share it, because I don't care who you are, you're going to learn something today. You may not even agree, but it's going to work on you, and you're going to think about it, and you can't forget it, and your logic's going to draw you closer and closer to what I'm saying until you finally will get it, because we're not going to talk in any of the mumbo jumbo you've ever heard before. We're not going to make assertions that we cannot back up. We're not going to make one point that cannot be proven. And you're going to be surprised at how many points we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's just logic. Any good philosopher or scientist, mathematician, or even a child, if you think about this, you can understand it. You may be already mesmerized and hypnotized by the lies, but as soon as the light comes in, man, the cold, frozen lies will melt in the face of the truth or the light, because there's warmth in the light. There's motion, there's goodness in the light. It's infectious. It will transform your minds into happy little, amazing, flying, twirling little acrobats in the universe of reality, where you'll find everything you ever needed was there. Everything you needed was within you, but you never knew where to look. You kept looking outside of yourself for these truths. You kept looking to the clowns to entertain you. You kept looking for the king's jester, who was dressed not to tell the truth, but to entertain. And anything he spoke had to have been within the bounds of the king's rules. And everybody knows the king had the most beautiful clothes and was adorned in royal garb. And his authority was apparent, and his staff of rulership was beside him. And we knew that everything he said was true, so long as he was present, because if we admitted that this was only his rules and not reality, we would have been taken to the gallows. And so we were mesmerized through fear to obey and to believe. But friends, we're not going to listen to the jester. That is that little fool in the deck of cards that keeps going around and around on the wheel of fortune. And all he gets is aces and spades, and then he'll get a heart. That'll make him forget the spade, right? And then out pops a diamond. He's rich. He's so happy, he's dancing. But somewhere, somebody comes along and says, you got to pick another card. This is an infinite picking of cards. They just keep coming. This is a place of duality. The next card you pick is a clubs, and you go to the gallows. This is the game we're playing. So those are what we would call in the Bible the demons, that, or the devil. The devil is the joker. And the devil is you, right? There is no other devil but the one within you, the diabolical one, the double, the lower ego, the fool, who keeps going round and round in this mesmeristic game. Today we're not going to look at that. We're not going to be deceived by these five kings or the five senses. we're going to crucify him. And then we're going to be like Jesus, who was laughing, looking down as they crucified some corpse on a tree, thinking, what are they doing? I'm up here. I'm free. I'm eternal. You can't touch this. And they go and fly away, and they can't never really go back and live with the peasants because the peasants believe in death. And the peasants are angry, and they'll get a posse and probably lynch you. And, you know, you're powerful. You could probably just send fire down from heaven, like the apostle said. Hey, shall we send fire down from heaven? And they're like, Jesus says, you have no idea of what spirit you are from. You just don't understand what you're talking about. That's not kind of fire that we want to use, because if we use fire upon them, if we judge them, we will be judged as they were judged by us. This is the catch-22. In order to have vengeance and send fire on others, it can only be done through fear. It can only be done because you think they can hurt you and you've got to hurt them first. If you're operating under that delusion, you'll be looking over your shoulder for the fire that's going to come and take you out. This is the world we live in. The world of delusion. The world of fear. The world of the fool, the lower ego. And this is the world where people believe that we live on a globe traveling 66,000 miles an hour through an infinite blackness, around and around. There is no deity. And when you die, you're gone. Well, we're going to break that mold, and we're going to tell the truth, finally, about the place that we live, what it is that we live on, how we got here, and why, and where we're going. And I guarantee you're going to be very happy by the time you get done with this video. To start with, I just want to talk about well, we got to get into some facts that you may not be aware of, but that science itself is aware of, and they're hiding from you. They know the truth, and the model that they're telling you about the globe and outer space and the stars is actually true, but only in a parable. They never lie, the elite, because they're only told to speak to us on our level. So the children of Israel went to the mountain and they saw the light, but they didn't want the light. So Moses had to put a veil and give them a bunch of instructions which were not good, regulations that were not good. And they bowed down and worshiped the golden calf because they were blind, and blind guides they are, and they will lead the blind right into the pit. But today, we're going to take off the blinders, and we're going to look right through the flesh, in through the veil, beyond the veil, into the Shekinah glory. And we're going to find the truth, and it's going to be so beautiful. To start with, did you know that outer space was very, very cold? And this is important to know, because we need to know why there is an ice wall all the way around. Now, we're going to have to figure out why there's ice at the North Pole and the South Pole. And is there a pole at all? And what's beyond the pole? Let us start with just some simple math. So you write into Google, temperature of outer space. Temperature of outer space. And it says the average temperature of outer space is 2.7 Kelvin, or minus 454, rounded up, 455 degrees, which is just above absolute zero. The point at which molecular motion stops. This baseline temperature is set by the background radiation from the Big Bang. It's not consistent throughout the solar system. For example, empty space is much colder than planets, moons, or asteroids because there's almost nothing to absorb the sun's energy. Space is very, very cold. The baseline temperature of outer space is 2.7 kelvins minus 455 degrees Fahrenheit, or 270 degrees Celsius, meaning it is barely above absolute zero, the point at which molecular motion stops. But this temperature is not constant. Okay. They say everything twice now. I don't know why. But it's where molecular structures or motion or energy stops. There's no energy at all because there's no sunlight. So it's absolute zero, which means motion stops. Motion is a product or a variable of time and space. And that you can look up on your own, because we're not going to have time to look up and prove every assertion I make, but most of you know this. This is Newtonian physics. Where there is no motion, there is no speed. Light itself travels at 186,000 miles per second. If it stops, then there's no light. It's a dead charge. It's death, which is no energy, which is no life, which means it does not exist. Without motion, there's no gravity, there's no matter, there's no material. So, outer space is not space at all because there's no time. There's no time, there is no space. Space is material. Space is the measurement of things. Space is the length, breadth, and depth of material. Without breadth, depth, and length, there is no material. There is nothing. So space is no thing at all. There is nothing. And therefore, outside of the Earth's dome, which we will show today, there is a dome. We will show a lot of things today based on logic, scripture, and their own science. But outside that dome, and by the way, the stars, the sun and the moon and stars, were made in that expanse that is the beaten firmament, or a firm. The rabbis said it was made of ice. And this is what we've been saying, and this has to be scientifically, because the ozone is full of water molecules and air, and it evaporates to a certain point and stops. Where does it stop? Where it freezes. And the Bible says there's the storehouses of snow and ice above the mountains. And there are two windows on each side, and we'll explain why there would be that. What these windows are and what all of this is. But what causes freezing then? A lack of sun? Well, we have a sun. So we won't get into what that is at the moment. But anywhere that the sun could pierce, I mean, they're claiming it's 930 million miles away. So if we admit their figures for the Earth, it's 8,000 miles through diameter, 24,000 miles around. And the sun's 930 million miles away. So wherever that sun strikes, or the light attains and brushes up and touches this Earth, however big it may be, up to 930 million miles, if it were that big, there would be motion. There would be time and space and matter, material. The Earth itself would be there. That's what material is. Material is motion. It is energy. Okay, so whatever the sun is, or wherever this energy is coming from, it obviously is coming from everything, right? From every material thing. There has to be motion. There has to be length, breadth, space, material. But outside of whatever is real is nothing. And what that is a zero temperature. It's absolute motionless. And I used to think about what could cause there to be snow or ice at the poles and not in the middle. And one theory that I had been told my entire life helped me see how that could be. And that would be that the earth was round and the sun was shining down at just a straight shot at the equator. It was warmer. And they said, well, if the sun shone through the atmosphere, it takes longer to get through the atmosphere because it's shining from an angle. And the sun, and the earth is round, and so on the backside it's dark, and therefore it's cold. And if it kind of wobbles, and therefore there's winter and spring, and this all made sense. It does a little bit. To some degree, it kind of explains why theoretically there might be some of the things that's going on. Briefly, if there was a point where matter stopped for whatever reason, not necessarily because it's on the backside, but consciousness or whatever causes material things just stopped because of us not believing it or imagining it or it not being there, then it would just be nothing. And that would be that place of blackness outside of our sphere of understanding. And that darkness would be very cold, and it would be very much like a big wall of ice because you couldn't penetrate it. It's nothing. That's literally what would happen. The highest particles of waters and air and stuff, that the highest, lightest substance, just before it goes into the place where it disappears, it would be frozen. But what would be the shape of this ground, this earth, then, in that sense? We're trying to imagine. We're imagining thoughts or forms. We're in a bubble of reality. We could think below and up, but when we think of up, we think of the sky. When we think of down, we think of dark, dirt, fire, molten, whatever. But the only place where we think about things and trees and butterflies and bees and life and mountains and rivers and streams is in both or four directions around us. And we imagine that over that hill there's probably something, and over that hill there's probably something. That would mean that theoretically, if we traversed each and every hill, we would approach the apex and look over, and there would be something. Because we're anticipating something. We're imagining, and we're imaging, and we're making form. And therefore, literally like a flat plane, there would be an infinite plane, as long as we were able to continue to believe or go forward. But if we had some false belief where we believed there was a barrier or a wall, we might literally come to the wall because that's what we believed. But the one thing we know is that it would be a flat plane, because we would think in terms of in front of us, forward, backwards, left, and right. We don't think of mountains and trees and streams above us, or mountains and trees and streams and birds and animals below us. We only think of in the four directions. The Bible talks about the four directions because we're talking about a plane, not a sphere. And if you are imagining consciousness doing all of this, consciousness is somewhere, and that consciousness is going to be wherever is the center of everything else around you. And the peripheral is going to be like a disk or a peripheral circle around you until it reaches the place where you're not thinking or imagining anything, and it's no motion, time, or material, and therefore it's cold, and there would be ice, an ice wall, perhaps. But also take into consideration the fact that All of this was already known thousands of years ago, and all of our languages and our words describe reality. It's just that we no longer listen. So planets are planes, flat planes, and Earth is a planet. It is a flat plane. But when I started hearing about the flat Earth and this ice dome, I didn't believe it because none of this made sense. And I still don't believe it in that sense. Okay, but we're going to clear it up today, friends. Absolutely 100%. So we said the other day, Joseph Smith said there were people on the moon. There were people living on the sun. There's people living on various planets, Kolob and so forth. These were the governing planets, which were the divine beings that lived up there in the north. And he said that at the North Pole, there was a region like a bucket or a cauldron, and the 10 tribes lived there. But that puzzled me because I was certain that, and I believe that Joseph Smith taught this as well, that the everlasting mountains, the eternal mountains, is where the 10 tribes went, the lost tribes. And doesn't mean that they're lost, it just means we don't know where they are, but they're not. It's like they didn't disappear, right? They probably didn't leave the planet, right? But they're somewhere. We don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. They've lost their identity. There's a veil over their heads. They don't know who they are. Well, we've talked about in all of my videos, and we're not going to have time to go through all of this here in depth, but we've talked about Jerusalem, the original Jerusalem. The only Jerusalem ever is there at Heliopolis. And that's the central place on earth of all the land masses. Cairo, or the Great Pyramid, is the center, exactly, of all geographical locations on earth, not the water or the globe or anything, but just the continent, all the land masses. And so it's like a hub, and even the Bible uses that word. It's this Hebrew word that means, they translate it sometimes a cave, but it's like a spiraling cave, a vortice, shall we say, that is under that point at Heliopolis. The Bible calls it Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah that Abraham purchased and was buried there. Well, as we know, Osiris, was buried at the Great Pyramid, and that's his empty tomb. Osiris, right, was put in a box, chopped up his brother into 14 pieces. Isis gathered up all the pieces, including the phallus, and somehow had put his semen in her, got pregnant, and had Horus. Horus defeats Set, or the darkness. That's what that means. And Horus, then, the light, is resurrected through his own son. Osiris is resurrected through his son Horus by being born, or having the sun come up on the horizon. And then daylight happens all over again. It's like a resurrection, but it's really a new thing. It died, now it's back to life. And like Christ says, the Father's in me and I'm in the Father. The light is in all of us. It's this fertility right. It's this great, amazing parable of life, the Divine Comedy. Well, all of this was written in the stars, but before it was written in the stars, it was written in the Great Pyramid. They built that monument. Isaiah 19 says that it was a monument to the Lord at the border and in the midst of Egypt thereof. And so everything that is true happens to be written thousands of years before you and I and all of our NASA scientists are spouting all this nonsense. And they taught, and we will show here today, they taught something very interesting. What they taught has never been explained to anybody. And lots of YouTubers have been trying to explain it, but they haven't got it quite right. It's very clear that all the nations taught the same thing, a certain cosmology. And it's also taught in the Bible. The 10 nations, the 10 tribes, went out to Galilee, or the circuit of Gilgal that Jesus preached to the tribes, all the tribes. He sent them only into the lost 10 tribes of Israel. That's the whole world in a circumference around Heliopolis. They went out and went to the eternal, everlasting mountains that encircle that spot in the middle, Heliopolis, which is, if you look on the map, you'll see those mountains that go to the Aleutian Islands from Alaska through Japan, down through Taiwan, and all the way to New Guinea, or where, I don't know, goes down through New Zealand or something to Australia, up through Argentina and Peru, and on up through Mexico and North America and back around to the Aleutian Islands. That's the eternal ring of fire, and those are all mountains. And why would that be? Well, we're told that there's this globe and it's all full of water on all sides, but then there's this ring, like a plate, with mountains all the way around it, and the continents are in that ring. Well, the 10 tribes went to the eternal mountains, or the peripheral of the land masses, and as you go outward, it seems to be going up, 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 and there's this wall of ice beyond the mountain range that we're all in, like a big cauldron. So the earth might be flat, but it may be more of a cauldron, because as you go towards the outer part of the disk, you're going up, because higher altitude freezes, because it's going to that place where we don't imagine anything, and there's just nothing there, and it's cold. The end of our concept of what our world is. So what is the firmament? What is the sky made of? The firmament is a beaten, hard barrier. And the earth was made first, not the sun, the moon, and stars. So therefore, everything revolves around the earth. And earth is matter, material. And it has a north and a south pole. That part of science we're getting right. And in fact, much of what we teach in science today is correct, but it's being taught, it's like a parable. When they say there's outer space, and they say it's cold, they know what they're saying. It doesn't exist. There's no material parts. There's nothing out there. And therefore, there's no time and there's no space. And so the distance between one of these stars and another star, there is no distances. It isn't trillions of light years, because light does not travel through nothing. Light can only go from one light to another light through space-time continuum. Space-time continuum travels by means of the elemental chart from the highest frequencies to the lower frequencies, in wavelengths, in variations and variables, in speeds and motions and lengths and measures. And therefore, every place of consciousness is a bubble within nothing. It only, the physical part of it only exists because you thought of it, because of your living mind, because you said, let it be, and it was. And you speak it. And all things were made or framed by the word, Hebrews says, chapter 11. And in the beginning, the Lord spoke, and it was done. And John 1:1, in the beginning was the word, the logic. The logic is the organization of things. And things are material, variables, thoughts, concepts. And therefore, nothing can exist without mind. And through the logos, all things were made that were made. And therefore, nothing exists in a void. And therefore, in outer space, nothing exists. And therefore, the light cannot be beyond nothing. If it's nothing, nothing is there. And nothing can exist in nothing. Or something cannot exist in nothing. All the stars are only something because we can describe the light. And that's energy, and that's motion. It's material, breadth, width, length, depth. and they must be joined in a space continuum. And we know that the elements are joined in that very manner through a chain link. The hardest substances known, uranium, all the way to the highest helium, Helios or L, which is the light. And so the light is the highest of the frequencies. It is connected to the material, the negative pole, which is the other end. And therefore, whatever light we're seeing our own bubble of consciousness. And that light itself is causing, as it slows down, that actual substance, the light, which is the actual reality, the thoughts, they coalesce, and through desire, they have gravity. That's all gravity is desire. Your will to form things. And things go into their places because of logic. So outer space doesn't exist. It isn't space at all. Because if it was space, it would have to have time. And if there was space and time, it would be material. And it could be measured. And then you'd know how far the stars were. You could possibly, conceivably measure it because you'd have a medium. You know, like water. You can measure how far it is from one point, or one boat to another boat, or one mountain peak to another mountain peak, because those are things. That's geometry. You have one angle, you can get the other angle, or the length, or whatever. But if you don't have anything, you have no measure. And you have nothing. So we don't travel to stars, whatever they are, in a tin can with rocket fuel, because material things can be traversed in only by mind. Your mind tells your legs to move, and they move. You don't instantaneously go places because you have thoughts in between other thoughts. You have a thought of being there, but you're still thinking of being here. And there has to be a gradual transcending of this place to that place. A transformation that your mind translates or conceives with pictures. Conceives of a distance, a certain effort, a certain action to get there. Because you can't go from, say, okay, this is white. Now we're going to go from white to red without anything happening. There has to be some change. You have to change your mind. This white light may be a peaceful essence in your mind. This red light may be fire, anger, passionate. You have to change your mind to get from there to here. This is just an example, or an illustration of what I'm saying. But you can't just say, I am a bird. I conceive and identify as a bird. Because I see my wings, I feel the air beneath my wings. I know how to fly. I'm hungry for worms. I am a bird, after all. Now, how am I going to at the same time be a bear? A bear doesn't have feathers. If I'm going to be a bear, I've got to be transformed. And the transformation is in images. To image is to mentally conceive. And there has to be some transition between one thought and another. And the universe is made of these transitions, each of them being variables of the whole, and they're all maybe variables of color, shapes, textures, forms, patterns, all of these things. There's an order. You don't go from one to the other like that. It takes time. Because you can't conceive of being one thing and conceive of being another thing at the same time. So there has to be more than one time in order to be more than one variable. And so this is very complex. We're not going to go too much more into that. But I'm showing you that this is a logical universe made from logic and mind. The earth is where it all began, and he separated the light from the darkness. Now remember, the darkness existed in the deep, in the abyss, where there was no light, the void, where there was no time or space. And darkness ruled over the nothing. And the Elohim that already existed, that's all of us, you're the Elohim, we spoke, let there be light. We conceived it, we imagined it, we uttered it, and through the word it was. And therefore there was a separation between consciousness and nothing, between thoughts, concepts, and this no time and space, this cold, this unknown that we have no concept for. Now, out of that darkness, maybe there is a higher science that one could eventually come up with, whereby we would understand that we hadn't thought of it yet, but it's still cold, it's still there, no motion, not moving, not being, not realized yet. Maybe if there's an infinite, if we can create infinitely, make, imagine further and further and further and further, like we go over one hill and we see what's on the other side, and next day we see, oh, there's another hill. And we made it up every day. We conceived what might be on the other side. Well, until we conceived it, it was dark. It didn't exist. So we turned the darkness, the cold, we put it into motion, thought, we made energy, we put life into it, and boom, we said, be light, and it was. So the darkness existed first in the physical, but the mental always existed. But somewhere in the universe everywhere in the universe that there is things, there are beings that are thinking those things. But if there's somewhere in the universe that doesn't exist, well, that may be the place, even though it's a no place. But that idea or that quality of the no thing or the nothing, or the no motion, no time, no measurement, is the place we're going to put new stuff that we create from the will, from the mind, from the ideas, from the conception, just out of our imagination. Once we see it, we imagine the colors, the shapes, the sounds, and then we feel it and live in it and be it. And that's why the earth and the universe is infinite. But the only way then that we can have an infinite universe that way is to have all the things that we know and believe now, and they would go out around us in a certain radius, and we would be literally living in a bubble of our own creation. But there could be other beings that live in another bubble, that have their own mind or their own ideas. But they couldn't have had their own ideas completely, because they're children of their fathers. So what they're doing is they're taking their father's ideas and their mother's ideas, and they're going forward and making more ideas from those ideas and making their own worlds. The two shall be joined together. They shall be one flesh. They'll make their own family. They'll go out from their father and mother, and the two shall be one, and they'll have children, and they'll make their own little kingdom, and they'll have their own little rules and bubbles and their own little town, their own little community. So the universe, there are governing planets or orbs of existence, thought bubbles, realities, where things are and can be measured and known and discovered. And where other minds, if they thought or communicated with that other group, could share ideas. Now, the only way the two light bubbles can share each other's ideas is with a space-time continuum between the two. There has to be some kind of corridor between the two, a cord, if you will. Now, people say that when they die, the silver cord is broken and they go back to the original blueprint world, the reality, which is just as real as this one, but it's the perfect reality that where there's always happiness and love and goodness, and that's, what we call eternal life or heaven. But there are varying degrees of children that are grasping and learning and growing, and they may be in different worlds. And we find there's a graduation. 7 heavens. There's the 7 planets, which are planes. And we graduate each of the planes, and each of the planes has an angel. And each of the angels requires a grand key to pass from one plane to another. And I tell you a sacred secret, friends. There is no actual key made out of metal that one can put in your hand and you can open the door. Then criminals would enter in. What I'm telling you is the esoteric, the secrets, the mysteries that were revealed by the apostles, but then it went into apostasy. And they didn't want you to know this stuff. So listen carefully. The only way is a key that you were given by the infinite mind of the universe. It's the key of wisdom. And there are 7, and we'll in another video, we'll talk about those keys. And anyone who acquires those keys does so because of their relationship to the truth and reality and wisdom and love. Not because of a church or a priesthood. No one can confer the keys upon you. And this is why Joseph Smith received the keys through angels and not from men. Because never was there ever a time when men could confer keys. And in fact, the early church with Jesus, it was Jesus conferring knowledge to his disciples. When those disciples died, the knowledge left with them. And they were all left in this darkness. And no one had the key to the kingdom. But the keys to the kingdom were taken from those who had the keys, who didn't go in, nor would they let anyone else in, and was given to a people who had love. And wherever those people are who have love, these are the children of the kingdom, and they have the keys. And who are they? They are those who have gone through the dark night. They are those who have gone through the path. Everyone must go through the path. One cannot advance except by increments, by logic, going through each variable or variation or graduation. It is automatic once you get through it. No one can hold you back. Knowledge is the only way. Absolutely no other way but knowledge. And through knowledge, wisdom, to return back to our Heavenly Mother, who beckons and calls us and says, "My children, hear my word." I was the master architect with the Father. Hear my words. Follow me. And so this is the path. And these are the keys, generally. And the universe then is made up of bubbles of light or consciousness. When you're in a dream, you're not anywhere physically. You're in your dream. You're in your concepts. But that dream world is shattered when you have stirrings or feelings in the body, or somebody touches you, and you waken to perceptions, which causes thoughts. It wakes you up into the mesmerizing variables and beliefs that you have, like trees grown in your garden with great deep roots that you cannot uproot lightly. Although with faith, one can uproot the fig tree that doesn't produce fruit, the knowledge of good and evil. But one has to have faith, and one has to have knowledge about what he's doing. One doesn't do it without wanting to do it, and one never wants to do anything unless it is good. And therefore, you need trial and error. So, if you notice, you communicate with people, other individuals in this world, and we all have agreed upon beliefs. We think that there is solid walls, that you can't walk through that. We're just making these rules, and we've all agreed to these rules. This is our mind that we've agreed are realities. This is our logic. This is the structure of our universe. It extends as far as we can continue walking. We've never walked to the end of our imagination. We've never gone beyond the other side of every mountain to see if there's something on the other side. And I guarantee that as long as we, the people, believe or think or imagine something on the other side, it will be there. So the earth isn't any specific size. It is the size that humans make it as their belief system makes it. Now, if we've determined as a group, as a whole, all of us have determined that there's a wall there that you cannot penetrate. It is impossible. And we're bound in this as a prison, then we will never leave this bubble. It will be a prison. Unless any one of us has enough power to break the spell of all of everyone else's beliefs and believe in their own heart and their own mind that that wall is not there or is not more powerful than them, that they do have the ability to go through the wall. And then we have mind over matter, which is the reality, but only for those who can believe. And one person breaks through and others will follow. And where will they go? They'll have to be somewhere outside of this paradigm, because everybody on this earth believes there's a wall there. Now you're special. You're a group that doesn't believe in a wall. And they will hate you and persecute you for it. But there will be those who will follow eventually. And all of those will graduate to a place where there is no walls. They will live in a world where there is no walls, and it won't be a place where others believe there is walls, because we can't have a whole group of people believing in walls and a whole group of other people that don't believe in walls, because the group who believe in walls will hear the people who don't believe in walls, and pretty soon they'll begin to be enlightened. And the higher will bring the lower to the higher. This is the universal logic. And so there is always higher beings and higher consciousness. But one travels from one world, like such as ours, to another world that we have not yet seen, but is undetermined, but we imagine, only by reason of faith and belief. But trying to build a spacecraft with rocket fuel and shoot out of the time-space continuum is impossible, because there is a cold, black nothing surrounding our reality. It has to be, because reality is what we've thought of. If we haven't thought of it, it's black. There's nothing there to go to. And the barrier between our nothing and their nothing is an infinite nothing, and we cannot get there. But those lights that we see must be something. But they cannot be beyond the nothing. They must be within the space-time continuum. They must be bigger and bigger balls of light or higher consciousness, all of which are connected through wormholes or silver cords, just like we are connected with our body, our old world, but our mind is higher and always grasping for higher and higher realms. So, we're going to end this here. I'm just going to make a small conclusion here. Let me just say that when Jesus was here, he died. He truly died. And he was truly raised up from the dead. So he doesn't not exist anymore. His old body, it's thundering here, died and rotted away. It had blood. It was carnal. His blood ran out when he died. When he came back, he said, see, I'm not a spirit. A spirit doesn't have flesh and bones. He didn't have blood. He was an immortal being. And immortal beings don't live in this world. They live in a world where their mind can believe in immortality. So Jesus said, I'm going because in my Father's house there are many mansions. There are many of these star systems that aren't what we've been told, by the way, and we'll get to that in the next video. But these other worlds without end, amen, the Bible says. And Jesus went into the clouds, and he's going to return the way he left. He's going to go to the top through the wormhole, and this is to the Shambhala. That's really thundering. The Agartha, to the city beautiful for situation, the joy of all the earth, Mount Zion, in the remotest parts of the north. If you go to the North Pole, you go through a wormhole, and the next realm, it's a plane, the next plane or level planet that governs this one, the planet that governs this planet. You'll walk right through it, through that wormhole, and because you're going to change your consciousness, you're going to have immortality. You will be changed. And this earth will then become like the moon, which has already been exalted because it has light of itself. It's glowing. Our earth will then receive light from itself. It will have life within itself. The entire world, when we walk through that portal, now this consciousness will have access to the higher consciousness, and the gospel will be shared with all the world, and they will all come to the knowledge of the truth. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I hope you have a wonderful evening. We're going to get into more of these things tomorrow or the next day when we get back to you. I don't know exactly when, probably tomorrow. We've got lots more to say, friends. Stay tuned and share this with your neighbors and friends. The Lord is revealing the truth, and the time is now. Have a good one. The Lord will bless you.